Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Ryan Alcantara with USC Rossier Career Services, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the USC Rossier Leadership Series, an ongoing series that showcases alumni leaders in the field. Today, we are having a conversation on collegiate teaching with your Rossier degree, four-year institutions focus, with our alumni guests, Dr. Shane Martin, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Seattle University, and Dr. Rochelle Woods, Director of Writing and Tutoring Center, first-year seminar and adjunct faculty at Azusa Pacific University. We are also with us here today is Isabel Wright, the other half of the Rossier Career Services team, who will be helping me manage the chat and the Q&A portion of today's program. I'm going to go ahead and stop share and great. Just a quick reminder, please turn on your cameras if you're in a space to do that, particularly as we move into the Q&A portion of the program. It would be great to be able to see all of you. And feel free to add questions to the chat or raise your hand. We'll be starting with our panelists who will share insights on their professional journey, particularly as they relate to teaching in the higher ed setting. Then we will open it up to questions in the second half of the program. And thanks to those who submitted questions in advance, we have those on hand as well. So let me start by introducing our panelists, and then we'll give them the floor. So I'll start with Dr. Shane Martin, who is the Provost of Seattle University. As Chief Academic Officer, he oversees the Academic and Student Affairs divisions, including the 6 schools and colleges, the libraries, enrollment management, student and campus life, student success, global engagement, and numerous academic centers and initiatives. Provost Martin is a 2015 fellow of the Aspen Education Fellowship, a branch of the Aspen Institute. Prior to joining Seattle U, he served for almost 25 years at Loyola Marymount University as a faculty member and administrator, completing 14 years as Dean of the LMU School of Education and 6 years as Dean of Graduate Studies. He received an honorary doctorate from LMU in 2018. Provost Martin served as a state commissioner to the California Commission of Teaching Credentials for 10 years, served as a board member and chair of the Green Dot Public Schools Board, chair of Teach for America Los Angeles Board, and the Loyola High School of Los Angeles Board of Directors, and a founding member of the Deans for Impact, and is the past president of the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities Education Deans Conference, a past chair of the Association of Graduate Schools and Catholic Colleges and Universities, and a past chair of the American Educational Research Association, a special interest group on Catholic education. An educational anthropologist by training, his areas of expertise include intercultural education, inclusive excellence, educational policy, leadership, and Jesuit education. Provost Martin earned his Ph.D. in international and intercultural education at the University of Southern California, a Master of Theology degree at the Jesuit School of Theology of Santa Clara University, and a specialization in Hispanic ministry, a Master's of Divinity degree from JST, and a Bachelor's of Arts in History from Loyola Marymount University. Welcome, Dr. Martin. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for the warm and very, very long and formal introduction. I appreciate that, Dr. Alcantara. And great to see everyone. When I was asked if I would be interested in sharing some thoughts and a little bit of my experience, I definitely said yes to prioritize this for USC and the Rossier community. You heard a little bit about my journey, and I'll share more. But so important to me was my time as a graduate student at USC, and launched a career that brought me to Provost at Seattle University. And I mean, one message I will give you at this point in your career, you just never know what doorways and pathways can open. even prior to my higher ed career, I had a first career of about 5 years in secondary education that brought me into doctoral studies at USC. And, you just, as I say, you never know what doors are going to open. I mean, I started my teaching career as an adjunct professor while I was finishing my doctoral work at USC, and was working on my dissertation. And so I was actually hired at Loyola Marymount University in the School of Education. But even before that, I was hired to teach American cultures at Loyola Marymount. And because my doctorate was in international and intercultural education, it was a related field. And so that's also going to be one of my messages as you think about teaching opportunities. Assuming that all of you have various degree objectives connected to education, but because education is not exactly a particular discipline, but an interdisciplinary field of education, our opportunities for teaching and engagement are actually much broader. And I've had colleagues, either as they're working on their doctorates or after completing them, teaches adjuncts in an array of areas, either within a school or college of education or department of education, or in adjunct areas. I mean, I mentioned that my first adjunct teaching job was in American cultures, which at the time was a requirement at Loyola Marymount for undergraduates, and was a comparative culture class where the requirement was that the course would address at least 3 of 5 major ethnic and cultural groups that help to make up the American story and the American experience. That requirement over years has changed a little bit at LMU, but it was a terrific way for me to get started in my university teaching career. And that success led to teaching courses within the School of Education at Loyola Marymount in the areas of multicultural and intercultural education. Again, the requirements have changed over the years, but the general requirements in the state of California for a teaching credential still focus on competencies related to intercultural education, broadly defined. And so different institutions organize that differently, but that was a terrific fit for me. I found that teaching as an adjunct while I was working on my dissertation was actually a very good fit. Obviously, it took some time away, but it helped sharpen my thinking, and it brought me into community at another institution with faculty and professors. At the time, I didn't know that it would end up leading to further opportunities for teaching, additional courses as an adjunct, and then when I applied for a tenure line position, I was successful there. Little did I know that when I started out as a faculty member, first per course adjunct, and then assistant professor, associate, full professor, but that I would find my way into administration as dean of education there. And then over the years, as provost now, the chief academic officer at Seattle University. So it was an unexpected pathway, but again, my point is that it started with that first course as an adjunct, which made all the difference for me. So among the questions that I'm sure some of you have is, well, how do you get started? What are different pathways if you're interested in teaching? And what I found in my own experience, but even reflecting on experience with colleagues that I know well, and then later with my own doctoral students when I was working with them at LMU, and I would help them think about teaching opportunities within LMU or with other institutions. There's not just one pathway. There's multiple opportunities, and there's multiple pathways. And so much of it is about opportunity and different ways that you can prepare yourself. To state the obvious, networking is critically important. And don't ever hesitate to build your networks, because you never know. I mean, there are colleagues that I was in classes with at USC that are dear friends and colleagues today, and that have also become professional colleagues over the years that at different times have opened pathways for me in ways I never would have expected. So, you know, for those of you that are in your doctoral studies, you know, I mean, I know what that's like. You're going to class and you're keeping your head down at times and you're doing things. But my advice is don't hesitate to build those networks, because often the people that are in your classes and in your spheres right now are going to be incredible professional colleagues that will be in positions to open doors for you in different ways, including teaching positions. You know, the other advice I would give about networking is really doing your homework on different institutions. And, you know, the greater Los Angeles area is rich with institutions of higher education. And so there's many opportunities. Of course, some of you might be in doctoral studies in different parts of the state or even the country via online education. But the idea of doing your homework, getting to know an institution is critically important. And this is one of the advices I used to give to my doctoral students. If you're interested in teaching, go to the website, go to the bulletin, read about the different programs, and start thinking about where you might have a good fit. Do some research, look at the different courses that could fit your interest and your professional background and experience. And when you connect with an institution, make all that known in both a communication, a written communication you might send to a program director, to a department chair, or even to the dean. I mean, as dean at Loyola Marymount, I would regularly get unsolicited letters with a CV attached saying, you know, I'm so-and-so, and this is my background, this is my interest. I'd really like to make it known that I'm available for adjunct teaching in, you know, in your program. And here's, you know, I've looked into a few of your programs. Here's where I think I might have a fit for you. And here's some of the classes that I could teach, and here's why. You don't want to make it too long, because you want to make sure that people can actually read it. But you have to market yourself, and you shouldn't be shy about that. You know, part of what I'm going to say next is not without controversy in terms of sort of the labor market for faculty in higher ed. There's a range of opinions on this. What percentage of the faculty really should be tenure line? What percentage should be contingent or adjunct? But statistics tell us that it's roughly about 50, the national average is roughly about 50% tenure line and 50% contingent or adjunct, including term faculty. So my point is that depending on the institution, they're probably going to be somewhat in alignment with that national model, meaning that institutions need adjunct faculty. They need and want you. And so as dean, I was always looking for interesting, creative, engaging, even entrepreneurial adjunct faculty, including doctoral students, recent doctoral students. I mean, my view was that if you're either working on your dissertation or you've recently completed it in the last few years, in many ways, you're on the top of the research, you're on the top of methodologies, you're exactly the kind of person that would add life and energy and value to the program. And so you shouldn't ever think, well, I'm hesitating because I'm a new Ph.D. or Ed.D. or I'm a new ABD. No, you have a lot to offer. And so really market yourself. One last tip I'll share when I talk about networking is if it works, if you're able to do this and it works for you, particularly if you're located in the Los Angeles region, you know, pick a few institutions that you could see yourselves building and developing that relationship, and go to a few events that are sponsored within the school or college or program. And, you know, speaker events, different events that they might have, where the folks that you want to network with and build relationships are likely to be there. Program directors, department chairs, even the dean. And don't be shy. Introduce yourself afterwards. Come up and say hello. And I'm so and so, and this is what I'm doing. And I'm in my EDD program at USC, or I'm recently graduated, and I'd love to get more involved with your program. Those relationships really matter, and I valued those relationships, and that someone would take the time to show up to one of our events and one of our speakers and engage with us, and then engage with me. And inevitably, I would ask them to send me their CV or resume, and then I would already have their information in my head, and I would look for that and give it more of due diligence when it would come in. And so that might be something that you could consider. Ryan, I have other ideas, but I'm going to hold for now and give Rochelle a chance to talk, and maybe we can, in the question and answers and discussion, we can surface more ideas as well.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. That's very insightful. I put a resource in the chat on networking, obviously a really important part of seeking teaching positions. I'll also highlight, that going to events, I mean, maybe stalking isn't the right word, but if you have some areas or some individuals that look for those opportunities. And there's a lot of things that are done via Zoom these days.
Right.
And so even attending that and then a follow-up conversation with somebody, oh, I went to this workshop. You want to demonstrate a real interest in their institution or in their program. So now I want to give our second panelist an opportunity to share her story. Welcome Dr. Rochelle Woods, who is the director of the Writing and Tutoring Centers and First Year Seminar at Azusa Pacific University, where she also serves as an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Higher Education since 2017. She teaches courses in the college counseling and student development and doctorate of education programs and serves on dissertation committees. Prior to APU, she was at CSU Fullerton in the roles of Executive Director of Special Populations, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs, Director of Student Academic Services, and the coordinator for campus programs, clubs, and organizations. As the executive director, departments in her portfolio included educational opportunity programs, TRIO, student support services programs, Center for Schools, Veteran Resource Center, Athletic Academic Services, and the Male Success Initiative. She began her career in student affairs at Pomona College. Her dissertation research focused on culturally responsive instruction, and her areas of interest include issues surrounding access, retention, and graduation. Dr. Woods earned her EDD in higher education, higher ed administration at USC Rossier, a Master's of Arts in Student Affairs Administration from Ball State University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Clothing, Textiles, and Interior Design from the University of Akron. We'll also share that Rochelle is a dear, dear friend. I've had the pleasure of working alongside her. We were both at CSU Fullerton together, student activities, orientation, NACA, all kinds of fond memories. So thank you so much, Dr. Woods, for joining us, and I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity just to be able to share with you what my journey has been. And then afterwards, also serve as a resource for you. What was said earlier about building the network is very important, and I always like to help people as they're going along their journey professionally and academically. So just to give you a little bit of context, and I appreciate Ryan giving you kind of my bio, but I was probably a very traditional student affairs practitioner. I was involved in student government and worked on campus as an undergrad and kind of fell into the position of student activities, student affairs, quite by accident from a mentor actually I had when I was an undergrad. And so I made the decision to switch from my clothing, textiles, and interior background and go straight to a master's program. So did the very traditional undergrad to grad program, and did that at Ball State University, which is located in Muncie, Indiana. Interestingly enough, the professors that were in the master's program there were all practitioners. So we had classes with, like, the vice president for student affairs taught a class, the dean of students taught a class, the director of housing taught a class. So that was kind of my first model where I would actually see people who were practitioners, but also instructors too. And kind of full circle moment, that's what I've become in my career. But I've definitely had experience mainly on the administration side, working at, small privates, large institutions, and now at a small liberal arts Christian institution at Azusa Pacific. And I think it has been my experiences on the administrative side that have helped strengthen the teaching aspect of it, because the teaching is, the classes that I teach specifically at Azusa Pacific are very practitioner focused. These are students who want to become administrators. So being able to bring my experience, like my 30+ years experience now, into the classroom and kind of give them real life scenarios of things that they'll be dealing with, or many of the case studies that I use in class are things that I saw happen in the professional world. Really facilitating those conversations and helping them as they begin to navigate as emerging professionals is something that I get great joy out of. If you had told me when I was first pursuing my doctorate that I would eventually end up teaching, I would have like, oh, that's not something that I had planned. But like what was said earlier, there were just opportunities that came along. My network was very important in my decision to become a faculty member, an adjunct faculty member. It actually came about happenstance. One of my mentors who I worked closely with at Cal State Fullerton left Fullerton and then became the program director for the master's program here at Azusa Pacific University. And they had an opening, a last minute opening. They needed somebody to come in and actually teach a class. And she knew that potentially I could probably do it. I would be interested in it. And that was my first foray to even teaching at the adjunct level. Now, prior to that, I had been teaching like a University 100 type of class for first-time freshmen at Cal State Fullerton. That was team taught. It was a student affairs professional along with a faculty member. So I had an opportunity to kind of shadow that faculty member and kind of see how things worked in the classroom. I also spent a good majority of my professional career at Cal State Fullerton as the assistant dean for student affairs in the College of Natural Science and Mathematics. So I really learned the academic affairs side of it by being the student affairs professional in an academic college. I understood exactly how like the dean's cabinet worked. I understood the tenure process. I would hear feedback from students on, professors and their different teaching styles. So that kind of also exposed me to what it would potentially look like for me to become an instructor. So along the way, again, not intended, but I was being exposed to teaching. And so then when the final opportunity came along for me to step into that role as an adjunct here at APU, I felt I was ready, right? I mean, I think there are probably things that you can look at in your career that are preparing you for this. Even thinking about all of the workshops or presentations that you might have done at professional association meetings or things like that, that's basically taking some material, learning more about it, and then being able to translate to students or to an audience. So also just having many years, and again, Ryan and I have probably presented together at a couple of different conferences, kind of prepares you for this role. I think the other thing that also exposed me to it, I was involved in NASPA, in the Dungy Leadership Institute, where I was actually faculty. Cal State Fullerton was a host campus in 2017, and I was selected as one of the faculty. And in that role, it's basically a 5-day intensive workshop for undergraduate students who are considering going into the profession. And so they bring faculty from all across the country. We get together, we set the curriculum, we talk about what we're each going to cover. And so that again was an opportunity for me to kind of work as a faculty member in, through a professional association. So again, looking for those opportunities, I think building the network that way as well, because through those kind of experiences, I've met a lot of different people who I continue to keep in contact with today. Has, I think, expanded my purview of what, your traditional instructor, your traditional teaching is. I think, again, going back to the whole networking piece, again, if you can kind of follow my trajectory, it has been about just opportunity, you know, somebody who knew me, somebody who knew that I could probably be good fit in this role. And since becoming an adjunct here, and again, have been doing it since 2017, you know, I've immersed myself in the Department of Higher Education. So I attend all the events where the students are going to be. I help when they have professional development days. I serve on some of the master's students. They have to do a capstone project. So I'm not just teaching, I'm also just kind of embedding myself into the department. And that way I've gotten to know the faculty, the full-time faculty here as well. And I think that, again, just helps me have a richer experiences as an adjunct. The way that APU is set up, there's not a traditional tenure process here. All of the faculty are on contracts, essentially what we considered our full-time faculty are on contracts, usually around a 3-year contract, and then they get renewed. But like what Dr. Martin was saying earlier, there's a few of the full-time faculty that are in the Department of Higher Education, and then the rest of us are all adjuncts. So we're all working full-time jobs and then coming to teach one night a week. And it kind of works out schedule-wise, being able to balance, like if you're thinking about doing a full-time administrative job and then being able to teach as well. It's a nice balance. I think the one thing that I have benefited from professionally by teaching is it definitely keeps me up to date with what's happening in the field. Especially when I'm teaching, one of my favorite classes to teach is the administration in higher ed or administration in student affairs class, where we're talking about what's happening in higher education. We're talking about administrative decisions. We're talking about budgeting. So all of the things that have been happening with higher ed, you know, kind of being under the lens, I have to keep up on it because we're having those discussions in class. So I think it also just makes me overall a better professional. This last summer, of course, we were talking about whole areas of free speech and encampment, bless you. And, you know, these real world things that are happening. And so to be in a classroom where we're able to have those discussions, because sometimes those might not happen in the work world, but to really delve in and have those discussions, especially with students who are working at a variety of institutions, you know, they're usually doing a graduate assistantship at a variety of institutions. I'm also learning from them. So it's definitely been, I think, a rewarding experience for me professionally. In fact, I'm at the point in my career now where I'm thinking, can I kind of retire out of the administration side of my life and become like a tenure track, or not a tenure track, an adjunct faculty at several institutions. Being located in Southern California makes it a little bit easier. You know, I could continue teaching at APU, but then I also think about my network that's back at Cal State Fullerton. You know, I know those faculty that run that department. So if I expressed interest and said, hey, I'd love to come and maybe teach 1 or 2 classes for you, and just kind of making that my full-time role before I was moving to official retirement. But I also think about opportunities too, about maybe managing a master's program, because there is a certain amount of knowledge that you have to organize a program and deal with all the admissions stuff, and being an administrator for as long as I have, feel very comfortable in that role, in addition to being in the classroom. So I just think definitely if this is something that you're thinking about, there's lots of opportunities out there. It's just like what was said earlier, you got to kind of build your network, make it known that you're interested in these kind of opportunities. Even if it means, and Ryan, I have to thank you, he comes every single semester as a guest lecturer in one of my classes. I use some of my friends to come in and do that. Or again, if there's opportunities for people that you know that are teaching class, and I've had this happen before, people who know that I teach, they'll ask, hey, can I come in and do a lecture in your class? And that kind of gives them a segue into being in that classroom environment. So there's, I think, just many different avenues you could take based on, again, what your interests are, the people that you know, and the opportunities that arise. But take advantage of all the opportunities, because you never know where they'll lead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Woods. I appreciate that perspective. So we're going to open it up for questions. Thank you for those that are able to turn on your cameras. It's great to see everybody here. I'm going to share a link. This is the second in a series. We did a session earlier on community colleges. So if you missed that, there's the link to it. It's in our Career Services YouTube library. But And thank you to those that submitted questions. I've got a couple of questions that I'll start off with, but I want to highlight too that I do adjunct teaching, and it is my experience and I've had a lot of I've had a lot of conversation with our students and alumni who have expressed, I want to do adjunct teaching. How do I go about doing that? And my interest in this series is to provide some insights from more people than just myself. But networking is a key. And the message that I often hear from folks is, oh, I applied to an adjunct position. And while that may be a requirement in the process, and I'll share from my perspective, it's usually the last step in the process. It's like, oh, can you teach? Let's get you all set up. And then it's, oh, you've got to fill out this application because we need it. And that's not always how it runs. But I do want to kind of to start off with a little bit of reflection on one of the questions that came up. It was, how do you go about searching for teaching opportunities? And I know, Dr. Martin, you talked about networking and kind of, canvassing institutions that you're interested as an important first step. Anything else that either of you want to add to that process of what people should be thinking about beyond just applying?
Well, I'll add a couple further thoughts. Rochelle talked about NASPA as a very important professional organization for those who are involved in, student affairs. And I would highlight other professional organizations depending on your particular area of emphasis. Of course, AERA, as we know, is the large one. But there, and especially in California, I mean, I'm assuming some of you are interested or connected to teacher education. Some of you, it might be leadership. Some of you, it might be mental health and counseling, or higher ed leadership, or student affairs, et cetera. So there's just such a range of professional organizations. And that's definitely one of the places that those of us that do hiring, we're in those spaces, and that's where we meet people. And so, find a way to go to those events. And there's networking events within those meetings. There's formal networking events. There's informal receptions. USC Rossier School always does a reception at AERA and probably at other conferences. When I was dean at Loyola Marymount, we did that at AERA. And, people would just show up, either current doctoral students or recent graduates, sometimes to get a little bit of food and a little bit of drink, but always to network and just say hello, and it always welcomed. And so that's a great way to build relationships. And I would really encourage you to think about that. The other thing that I wanted to underscore that Rochelle mentioned was that part of her pathway has been contributing to panels for capstone experiences in programs. And that was so important and so true when I was at Loyola Marymount. So, for example, our master's program in administration and leadership culminated with capstone experiences, and we needed people to sit on those panels to give feedback. And that's just one program, but multiple programs had that. And that's a great way to get started. It's not teaching a full course, but it's a way to get started and have people know you. And I would actually get a letter or an email from someone saying, if you ever need me to help with any of these culminating experiences in these panels, I'd be happy to. If you also have professional experience in addition to your earned a doctorate, highlight that, depending on your own pathway. If you have K-12 experience, it could, depending on the program, that could be very valuable. Or other experience in higher ed, or in student affairs or student development, as Rochelle hired. So build to those strengths, and just make those opportunities known, because those of us in administration, in higher ed, department chairs, program directors, deans, even as provost, we need you. and so we are looking for you. It's about making yourself known.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Dr. Woods, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I know the process is usually that these pools, they have pools of adjuncts, right? That they'll keep open year round, and then you put your resume, your CV, excuse me, your cover letter in, and then they pull as needed. But what you were saying earlier, Ryan, sometimes it is the process. Well, they'll have a need and then they'll ask you to apply. That's why the network is so important. That's what happened in my situation. An APU, because it is a small private institution, can do their hiring a little bit more fluidly than some of the other institutions, but it was a matter of, we need you to teach this class. We want you to teach this class. Here's all the information, which I think is also too one thing that people might be apprehensive if they have not taught a class before. But usually once you start teaching a class, or when you are asked to teach a class, they'll give you the materials, right? They'll give you the book, you'll get the syllabus from previous instructors. So it is about, you know, taking that information and kind of making it your own. But thinking about, you know, putting yourself out there, making the network, and then just putting yourself in the pool and seeing kind of what happens.
Great, great. So again, I invite questions, but I'll look to another question that was submitted prior in the RSVPs. What are departments looking for in cover letters, and who should we contact to show interest? So I've got some thoughts on this, but I want to throw this out to both of you as well.
I'll take the second part of that question first. Who should you contact? I mean, my advice is don't be shy. Send your cover letter and your CV or resume to a number of people, because you just never know. I mean, even as provost, I get unsolicited cover letters with resumes for per course teaching. Now, the deans report to me, so I pass those on to the respective dean of a school or college with the suggestion that they pass it on to a department chair. But, you know, when I was dean of the School of Ed at Loyola Marymount, I would regularly get a cover letter and a nice note and a CV. And I would always send it to or talk to the department chair. And what would happen inevitably, not always, but sometimes the department chair would say, oh, I also got a cover letter from that person. And, you know, that, far from being off-putting, actually was something that we thought, well, this is somebody that really is serious about this. So this is just my view, is spread the net widely and feel free to send it to a program director, department chair, even to the dean, because you just never know when and where and how that CV and cover letter will get passed along. And, you know, I want to pick up on something that Rochelle also said. I think when you were talking about your pathway, Rochelle, your first teaching job, you said you were hired right towards the start of the term.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was true for me as well. And I want to say, you know, I'm maybe not proud of it, but when I was department chair and even as dean, we found ourselves in that situation. You never know. I mean, somebody that you expect is going to teach all of a sudden can't do it for different reasons, or you need another section of a particular class. And so what do? You go to your file of those CVs with cover notes. And so that leads to the other part of your question, Ryan. How do you distinguish yourself? You don't want it to be so long that you can't read it, but you want to have you want to express your intention, your knowledge of the institution. So you don't want it to be generic. And occasionally I would get a CV with a cover letter that clearly was generic and was a form letter. And in fact, it was to the wrong institution. And you don't want to do that, you know. Dear Dean at Pepperdine, and I'm at Loyola Marymount, you know, and it was just clearly they were just sending these out and they weren't personalized. So you want to do your homework, you want to show interest in that you've done, you personalize it to a certain extent, and then a few bullet points of why you're interested and why you would be a good fit for that program.
Great, thank you. Dr. Woods?
Going along those same lines, yes, if you're going to be applying, make sure you have a really good understanding of the institution's mission, the program's mission, you know, who are they trying to teach basically what their students look like. I think that's one of the things, even thinking about where you want to teach. Because even though many programs have very similar classes or similar curriculum, who they're trying to market to or who they're trying to get in their classroom might vary. So even thinking about, and this is just an example here at APU, because we are a faith-based institution, we try to have faith integration within the classroom. And so that would be very different if you were to teach at another institution that didn't kind of have that same mission and goal for its program. So really having a good understanding, I think, would also help strengthen your letter. Like, I have done my research on your institution. I know what kind of student body you have. And this is why I think that I would bring a lot to the table there.
Rochelle, if I could just add one thing to that, not only do your research on the institution, but consider doing your research on who you're sending the letter to. And so use your network, right? So, I mean, again, as dean at LMU, when I got a letter from someone that would say, as a recent graduate from the USC Rossier School of Education and a fellow Trojan, you might know that, ... I'd say, well, you know, I'm going to take a look at this in a special way. And so, you know, but somebody was smart enough to look me up and look at where I went and etc. So, you know, think of those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I would add, and this touches on something, Rochelle, that you mentioned earlier, in terms of the cover letter, sometimes we approach, especially your first teaching job, you have to emphasize transferable skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we get into this deficit mindset of, you know, well, I haven't taught, but, or I haven't taught grad students, but you don't want, like, you don't want to give them reasons not to consider you.
Mm-hmm.
So those are assets. Those are things you bring to the table. If you've done a presentation, you have a skill set to teach. And I'll say this, every person teaching a class that they've not taught before is unready, is not quite prepared to teach. And so, you know, you've got to take that leap of faith. So don't undermine yourself early in the process, and know that, you know, have that, like, really own those transferable skills.
Can I actually throw something in on the flip
Sure.
side of that? I think yes, definitely come in with the asset mindset that you can do this. The other thing that I think has made me kind of tailor my teaching style over the years is I earnestly read the students have to do the reviews at the end of every class. I read those and I really think, okay, this is how I was going to plan on teaching, and this is the message that I was trying to get to the students. Did they receive it the way I intended? And so some of the best, I think, ways that I have learned to kind of tailor my teaching has been feedback from the students who have taken the class with me previously.
Great. So again, I welcome other questions, but we've got a couple of questions related to, you know, in terms of applying to these positions, what's the importance of a research background? Do I need a CV? Should I have a terminal degree? And I would love your perspective.
Rochelle, you want to go first? I've been going first lately.
Sure. I think having a traditional, maybe research background for an adjunct position is nice, but not necessarily maybe required at the same level that you would have to be if you were going to do a tenure track position, like moving up from assistant to associate to full professor, because that's the expectation in that type of route. I think depending on the type of program that you're going to be teaching for, yes, it is nice to be able to publish articles, to do research and things like that. But realistically, if you are in an adjunct role, then more than likely you also might be working full time. So even thinking about when you can fit those kind of activities in is something that you'll have to kind of negotiate and navigate. I always said I would love to do more publications and research and things like that, but it's just a matter of slotting it in between my full-time job and my adjunct teaching, and trying to figure out where that, and my, you know, involvement in professional associations, kind of where do you kind of fit that in? But definitely I would say if you're not writing the articles, at least be up on reading the articles, right? Always keep current on the research.
No, I really agree. I with with Rochelle on that. I think it depends on the position. I mean, you could be interested in an adjunct position that is related to a course in research methodology, or a course that, you know, the research background is critically important, and that, you know, could even be a prerequisite for a particular course, but not necessarily, and certainly not all courses and all programs. It depends. So it's about fit. But my advice is go with your strengths and emphasize whatever you've got in your bag of tricks in your arsenal. You know, as Ryan said, don't lead with a deficit mindset. Lead with what's positive. If you are working full-time or part-time, apart from the program, you know, that's an asset, and that should be recognized. And you know, I mean, it was when I would hire adjunct faculty, I often found that some of my best per course university professors were those that at one time or another had taught in middle school or high school, or had worked in those different settings and had figured out, you know, pedagogical principles at that level, which then transferred. Not always, but it was just, you know, different things. But if you have that in your background, it's something worth pointing out. You know, you asked about a CV. As a department chair or a dean, or when I was a program director, because I came up through the ranks and did all those jobs at one time or another, I would look for a CV. And part of that is, you know, knowing that related to our accreditation requirements, that we need to collect CVs for all of our faculty, including all of our adjunct. And if somebody already has that piece together, that just shows me, again, their seriousness. But you don't have to overdo it. You know, it can be 1 or 2 pages. You know, one of the things people ask about, well, what if it's light? I don't have a lot of research. I don't have a lot of different things. Well, lead with what you do have, your work and life experiences, which I think can transfer. But the other piece on the research, you know, I mentioned AERA, and of course, there's a lot of other important professional organizations and conferences. Perhaps as a doctoral student, or even after you've graduated, you've had an opportunity to present research, either as a poster session or part of a panel, or even an individual per session. Highlight that in a cover letter, because, you know, maybe you've not taught before, as Ryan said, but, you know, in my recent poster presentation, I talked about this, or I'm looking at the problem of that. You know, all of a sudden it makes you interesting, and it stands out. And so you want to leverage whatever you do have. In terms of the terminal degree question, you know, the institutions might look at this in different ways depending on the institution. At Loyola Marymount, our preference for hiring always was with the earned doctorate, EDD or Ph.D. But we would hire people with earned masters to teach per course, particularly in teacher education, if they had experience, et cetera. Or in some of our leadership programs. I mean, some of our best adjunct faculty themselves were principals or vice principals. Maybe they hadn't earned the doctorate, they had the master's, and they had the professional credential as well. And so some of you have different professional credentials. The teaching credential, the administrative pupil services, et cetera. And you know, make sure that you highlight that. Those are really valuable in schools and colleges of education.
Right. And I would say, I mean, as we encourage networking, you know, having conversations with folks that are involved at those institutions, what does the pool look like? You know, do they have terminal degrees? Because I know, as you indicated, Shane, you know, some schools here, they require it. Others may not require it, but it's generally anticipated. But having those conversations are going to be useful to know, like, what's the right point to start doing this, and it can be offset with the right experience, or for particular classes. There's sometimes some flexibility in that. And so appreciate that background. I want to be mindful of the time. We've got a few more minutes. This was kind of addressed by you, Shane, but since it was a specific question that was put out there, how can middle school teachers in MED make the transition to other positions in higher education?
I actually think very well, particularly if someone with that background is able, through a resume or CV and through a cover letter, to convey their success. I mean, we talk a lot about teacher leaders, meaning in the K-12 system. Those are the people that we want to help teach and form in teacher education programs, but not just teacher education, and in other programs as well, related to K-12 education. So, again, as you said, underscored, it depends on the institution. Some institutions won't hire even a per course faculty member without the earned degree at the doctoral level, or at least ABD, all but dissertation. But many of the institutions, very good institutions in the greater Los Angeles area and beyond, will hire in certain programs with the master's based on that experience that you talked about. And the experience is valuable, very, very valuable, particularly in those professional programs that are preparing educators who are also practitioners.
Great. I have a question from the chat. Do you have any recommendations for current student services professionals that don't have research experience to get research experience in preparation for adjunct roles? So I guess one of the questions there, one of the components of that question is, do you need research experience for adjunct roles? And then if you don't have that yet, how can you go about getting that?
Rochelle, maybe you should start that one.
I think probably not necessarily going out and trying to do the research on your own, but connecting with a faculty member who is tasked with doing research and seeing if you can't work with that faculty member. I think especially if it's your first time doing significant research, whether it be working with a faculty member, working with, connecting with people in the institutional research departments at an institution, just going to learn more about it and getting exposed to it, I think is a good foray into kind of that research arena.
Good.
From a practitioner perspective, yeah.
And if you're dealing with data and you're sharing those data and that data is informing decisions, you're doing research. So again, don't underscore the work that you're doing. And if you don't feel like you're doing enough research, are there opportunities in your current role to do that? I think your supervisor would appreciate, interest and efforts to do that as well. We do have a question from the chat on contact, and I know both of you are on LinkedIn, and so that can be a good way to connect with you all. But I will, let me see. I've got time for one more question if anybody has something that they want to add, or I can pull one from my list. Any other questions? I do, and this does come up. So one of the questions that was posed, what are opportunities to teach or teach virtually in classes at USC with an OCL EDD degree? And so we do get I get questions a lot from students that want to teach here at USC or here at Rossier. And I'll just say I did these sessions with caution. We get these questions a lot. I encourage you to reach out to faculty. So if you're interested, talk to your faculty members, talk to your adjuncts, faculty that are adjunct faculty members about their experiences. But you can connect with, if there's a department you think you're able to teach in, reach out to that department chair and, have a coffee. If you're a student working on your degree, that's a great time to say, I'm looking to teach down the road, and would love to get your insight on what I can do to be competitive in that process. So doing that research to understand like what program, what courses you would be able to teach in. But realize if you're looking at Rossier, there's a lot of other students that are probably looking at Rossier as well. And so how do you differentiate yourself? And I would really encourage you to cast the net a little bit wider at other institutions too, and not just USC. Jade?
Thanks so much. I know we're running out of time, but I had a question. As someone with mostly experience in student affairs and in administration at a center within the School of Ed, I have perhaps a fear of going into the classroom. So I just wanted to ask if you could maybe lift up any joyful memories of your experience being in the classroom, especially with how higher ed is right now, as we're expecting changes with the new presidential administration. It feels a little bit like going to the front lines. And so I just wanted to invite any reflection around that.
Thanks, Jade.
I would say go with confidence, Jade, because everything that you bring is needed now more than ever. I mean, you're right. We are definitely in for a big transition, and we don't know what it all is going to be. We are divided as a society in many ways, and there are a lot of challenges and struggles. I firmly believe education is the best antidote to all of that. And what you bring, what each of you bring is really important. And yeah, there'll be challenges, but your experience and your grounding in that experience is what'll get you through it. So I would say, you should go with confidence no matter what. That's just my view.
Great. Thank you, Shane. Rochelle, any thoughts?
I just think being in a classroom setting sometimes, at least for me, reminds me of when I was, a new professional. And so sometimes it's just nice to be in a setting where they are so optimistic and so excited to be going into the field and serving students. It's, for me personally, a nice reminder of, this is the mentality I need to have. This is how I started, my career 30 years ago. And so it's just a nice reminder. I think the other thing is thinking about your role with them, especially for master's students. Like, you're probably some of their first professional role models, right? And so to be able to kind of guide them and mold them and shape them and listen to them and their nervousness about going into the field, at least for me, it's rewarding enough knowing that I always say I'm shaping the next professional, the next generation of student affairs professionals, because that's what we're doing in the classroom.
I will say teaching is not for the faint of heart. Evaluation, I think of evaluations, which always drive me nuts because course evaluations are like evaluating food service. You get really good, really bad, and they balance each other out. So, you've got to be prepared for that, because it was hard the first time looking at course evaluations, and you put all this work and you realize, wow, this person didn't like, or you get like the exact, like this thing that you do, these people hate it, these people love it. But it's just the reality of the way evaluations work. I want to give a huge round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much, Shane and Rochelle, for joining us here and for sharing your contact information. Any parting words of advice to our students and alumni that are on this call as they look to teach?
Well, I will have one last thought. That occurs to me is that in the environment we're in now, we have many programs in schools and colleges of education that are completely online or are hybrid. And particularly for those that are virtual, you're not limited to just what's in the Los Angeles region. We have a number of programs at Seattle University in education that are completely online, and we're hiring adjunct professors from across the whole country. We have a whole bevy from California. So, you know, when you do your research, look broadly and widely. And if you've got that interest or background in technology, highlight it in your cover letter. And if there's anybody from USC that's ever interested in Seattle U, let me know.
Great, thank you. Rochelle, any parting words?
Yeah, just have confidence that you can do it, right? Just know that it's not a perfect science to teach, but I just think the joy and what you'll learn about yourself is just rewarding in itself.
Great. Wonderful. Again, thank you so much. An absolute pleasure to have you both with us today. My words of advice, don't forget career prep. If you're anticipating, you know, I want to do teaching down the road, networking takes time. Like, so put some time aside now to build that network, you know, just spending time figuring out, you know, what are the schools, what are the programs, what are the classes you're able to teach, and start connecting with those folks, because it's going to take a while. So don't forget it. And if you need help and support, reach out to us at Career Services here at USC Rossier. And then I'll hand it off to Isabel to remind us what's coming up on the Career Services calendar.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Woods and Dr. Martin as well. I also learned a few things. So our upcoming events, we have 2 more for the remainder of the semester. The resume workshop for PASA students, co-sponsored by the PASA Network, with the PASA Network on Tuesday, December 3rd. 2 back-to-back sessions starting at 6. And it's open to all Rossier students, as well as navigating the early years of your higher education career. 4-year institutions focus, which is on December 4th at 12 p.m. via Zoom. And if you've missed any of our sessions, please feel free to scan the QR code, which will take you to the Rossier YouTube career playlist. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Fight on. Don't hesitate reaching out, and we're here to help.